Hey, everybody, welcome back. Happy Thursday. My name is Ashley Dole, and I'm joined by my co host, Natasha Velez. And we are going to bring you another episode of GovConHacks podcast related to service contracting. So if
Yeah.
you're new with us, please do be sure to subscribe and tap the bell for notifications. We're here most Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive right in.
Okay.
I wanted to do a services contracting podcast because, well, we did last month the staffing. So we had Tammy Hester on for medical staffing, which, while it is a service, there are other services that we also wanted to discuss. So,
Right.
we're talking about things like consulting, training, IT services. Give me some more. What
Project
else?
management,
Project
accounting,
management.
financial management. No. You said IT.
Basically anything that's not an LPTA.
Development, DevSecOps, Agiles, like installation. I mean, there's a ton of them. And it's a really big industry, services. And I personally like services way more than hardware. But you already know that.
Well, I mean, and to put it simply for our audience, if you're proposing, you're
Mhm.
probably looking at a service contract. If you're
Yeah.
quoting, it's going to be product, right? So this is going to cover pretty much a majority of a lot of industries. Environmental is one we didn't mention.
Yeah.
And services contracting is governed by FAR Part 37. So this is where you'll find the rules and regulations on acquisition.gov. We will go through some of those differences today. And I'd say it's probably fair to say that this episode would be for anyone either maybe already doing products, thinking of getting into services, or maybe you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do in government contracting and, how much time, each avenue is going to consume of yours, right? So in either way, there will be some benefit here for you if you have been at this a while or if you are brand new. And I will
Yeah.
say the thing that sticks out to me most, and this is one thing, it's like a thorn in my side, really, because I am in the services industry, is going to be that
Mhm.
most of our work, you don't really see, you do see some on SAM, but a lot of
Yeah.
them, they're going through, GSA schedules, IDIQ
Yep.
contracts, EPAs, GWACs, the best in class vehicles. So unless you have a GSA schedule, for one example, you're never going to see what's in eBuy, which is where the GSA schedule opportunities are posted, right? So there's always this confusion, especially from IT service companies. They're like, I know the government spends money on what I do. Why can't I find it? Where are the solicitations? So
Mhm.
we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. I'm sorry, platforms that you can use to identify services contracts. And I'd say probably one of the next biggest differences, and this isn't necessarily applicable in all contracts, but they do tend to have a bit of a learning curve, can be the labor categories and the labor rates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what would you recommend? Because I know when it comes to pricing, your labor categories are super expensive. Sort of walk me through what that looks like from a proposal standpoint when you're dealing with labor categories
I prefer time and material from
and
fixed price. From a
rates. Love
pricing
perfect
standpoint,
price.
it's easier. I think people gravitate to a firm fixed price because it's like it's one and done, and then you don't have to. There's not a lot of auditing required. There's not when you submit your invoicing, you don't have to like do that level of detail to see where your hours are coming from and your cost is coming from, and multiplying your indirect rates on there. And it's less risk to the government. So if they're like, if you I think the best way to say it is firm fixed price is less risk to the government and more risk to the contractor. Because if you bid, let's assume you bid at 350,000, but you missed something in your basis of estimate and you realize you went over. Well, You already bid at that 350. You can't go any higher. The government agreed to it. So now you're eating into your profit margin. So the risk is really on you to remain within budget. Um, so if there's something that you didn't foresee, well then it's gonna hit you, not the government. They get to keep their price that you quoted them. Time and material is based on literally just that, the time and the materials that you incur during this period of performance. So every month you can invoice your actual time for each labor category, each rate that you bid on, with your profit margins attached to that, and your hardware, your other direct costs, and your travel costs. So that's a really nice benefit to that. And then if you overwork in hours, if it takes more hours than what you estimated, that's fine. You can continuously continue to bill and just have amendments and modifications to the contract. So that's just a different way of looking at it. But ultimately, even in proposal wise, it's just easier because all you have to do is put down your labor categories, the price, and bid on it from there. I think that services versus hardware, in regards to services, it's a little harder, for the simple fact that there's a lot more requirements in services. It goes from your LPTA to your best value. So it's
Yeah.
really about your solutioning.
Right. And there's a, a lot more pressure on you, the contractor, to help the government
Right.
envision their solution, right? You have to be very detailed in
Yeah.
your technical proposal on how you're going to get it done. And
Yeah.
when we say how, I mean, I'm not just saying a project plan. We're
Right.
talking about what's your quality control plan?
Mm.
What's your staffing plan? So there are additional requirements that kind of make the process just lengthier to get these contracts, right?
Right.
So while services does tend to have a higher profit margin, I mean, it's kind of like a trade-off, right? You have the high profit margin, but your cost per sale goes up because you're writing often lengthy proposals. And when you're writing these proposals, and I'm sure that you could speak to this um, at in more depth than I can, you're talking things like resumes. So for every labor category you have a human that fills that labor category, that human has a resume. That resume
Right.
needs to be updated with new skills periodically. Those resumes then go into your proposal. So having sort of that content repurposing process on lockdown is
Yeah.
definitely beneficial, and having a plan for that when you're stepping into services. Because I gotta say, I do the work that I do in the commercial, B2B space all day, every day. And I don't
Hmm.
need to jump through all these hoops to get paid. I
Yes.
don't have to write this long 300-page proposal. It's oftentimes a discovery call. We develop a solution, a proposal,
Yeah.
the agreement, boom, you're doing the work, right? But government is not that way. For a
No.
very similar job I'm proposing on, we've got 2 months to write the proposal, pre-bid meetings, Q&A periods. There's like 50 some questions already on there. And every
Board
one of
review.
those answers has to go into my proposal in some way.
Yep.
I
Yep.
have to say this is the largest one that we have bid on thus far. We do a lot of subcontracting, but this is predominantly why we do a lot of subcontracting, is because
Hmm.
of the cost per sale. So something to think about. If in services, if you're like a subject matter expert in your field, it becomes easier for you to transition into the government market as a one person show, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to go after a staffing contract if you're a consultant, an expert witness, something of that nature. So there
Mm.
are a lot of opportunities like that that are easier captured from a service standpoint that are, like Natasha alluded to, firm fixed price.
Yeah.
So low risk contracts, firm fixed price, the government likes that. And if you're a small business, oftentimes those can be awarded to you through simplified acquisition procedures. So,
And there's also like some easy peasy ones. Like they have it's almost like hardware. I mean, you still got to do a proposal, but it's quicker than a service firm fixed price contract. So, like recruitment, you see
mhm.
very often that there'll be recruitment. Oh, we need you to hire, the following people. What is your percentage upon hire? So it's usually like the percentage of the salary. That happens a lot with the Department of State. That happens a lot with DIE. There's a couple of them that they focus on just that. So one of them was they wanted direct hires and they wanted you to stay within the 20-25% margin. So you can charge that. And that was a quick service one. And you didn't have to write like a gigantic proposal, but you would be their recruiter for the next 5 years. So that is a really good one. So there are some good services ones that are pretty quick that you can go after, but the majority of them do require like key personnel. They require detailed past performance. Like they want scope of work. They want to know the relevancy. They want to know that it was recent, that it's, similar to the scope of work that you are bidding on right now. They want to know what your risk management plan, what's your quality management plan, what's your staffing plan, what's your retention rate, what's your, once you hire these individuals, what is the fringe benefits that you will provide for them so they have low, turnover? Like the government wants to know your whole business plan. And that's what essentially your proposal is. And that's the difference between services and hardware, is that you have to put so much more thought into it.
Yeah, and I gotta say it's definitely good practice too for me, because I typically don't get to this phase of the project until after I've won the job, right? But now I'm having to hash out my whole project plan on the front end and more or less have all those details worked out to be able to even price it correctly.
Right.
So it's definitely, I mean, would this be something that I would rather somebody else bid on and me sub on? Sure, absolutely. But there's nobody that would do it better than we could. So that's why I made the concession in this case to go ahead and prime. Otherwise, I would have built a team, right?
I always say like you should
somebody in
the whole thing. I always say you should have like 75% of your bidding should be subcontracting, right? Because 75% the prime is focusing on, and you are just kind of caking on it, right?
Right.
And that's an easy win. That's easy money. But don't get comfortable. 25% should be prime.
Right. And let's and now since we're on the nuances of subcontracting and teaming, that was actually one of the things on my list to talk about today. A lot of service companies, they haven't gotten to the point where, because the smaller ones are a little harder to find. Let's be real. Yeah. So if you're not having conversations with the government, you're not looking at the forecast, you're not attending their events, keeping in touch with the small business liaison, oftentimes those will, go out to like Fed Connect or something, slip right by. You won't even see it.
Right.
So, but if your finger is on the pulse, you'll catch the smaller opportunities. But those aside for a moment, let's talk about the bigger opportunities. Like, for example, there are a lot of folks in our communities that are in either IT services or training. And those are two very contract vehicle heavy industries, right? So you see these contracts, and we're just going to use Soup 6 just because that's the hot one on everybody's mind, right? That disaster has been going on, I feel like, for 2 years now. Soup 5 was and keep me honest here, 5-year IDIQ with a 5-year option period. Government exercised all 5 years of the option period, so that contract went on for 10 years. Okay. Then Soup 6 got paused, so Soup 5 extended. So we're going on like now 12 years of the same primes on the same vehicle. And if you've read the requirements to get on that contract vehicle, like I can say something really sarcastic here, but this is a family-friendly show. They have they have a requirement in there that you had to be a sub on Soup to even qualify as a prime on Soup. So in this space, you are going to have to team and partner with other companies. It's not reasonable to expect to go at it 100% alone.
Right.
So it's changed the way that I look at my bid, no bid analysis, for example. Because instead of where I would have said, no bid, this is too big, I don't have this, I don't have that. Right. Now I'm calling my teaming partners and I'm saying, hey, can you guys do this work? Do you have A, B, and C? If they don't, then I know bid. But if they do, now we're having a conversation of how we can team up together. Does it
Right.
make more sense for you to prime? Does it make more sense for me to prime? And this is very much the way that we move in the services space. So if you're out there and you're like frustrated on sam.gov and you're not seeing anything that you can bid on, don't underestimate the power of teaming. And you can
Really
literally
important.
just use DSBS and search for
Mhm.
teaming partners. They may not all answer you, but this is where we get into making sure that you can communicate your value.
Yes. Services, unfortunately, with IDIQs, you almost have to. You almost have to. You're not going to fill every gap and every need. I've seen large companies that have been in this industry for years still absolutely need to. They know to partner. It makes you stronger. And even if you could do it all, it eliminates a good portion of the risk. So the government's also thinking of it as, okay, if I gave you this $100 million like IDIQ, if I give you this $100 million contract, can you reasonably, as a small business, do this all on your own? It's not even just capabilities of what you have in your past performance or what you can and cannot do. It's also about the concept of like, will I kill this small business if I give
They
them
don't
two?
want to put you out of business.
Yeah,
Exactly.
there is a real component to like killing a business really fast if you give them too much work they cannot handle. So if you partner, you're also sharing the cost and the resources and the risk. So that's just a different component to it to take into account.
It is. And I mean, we'll have another episode on JVs, MPPs, teaming, subcontracting another day. But when you're operating in the service industry, don't exclude the power of teaming. Maybe you are a WOSB or you are a VOSB, but the contracts that you keep seeing that you want to bid on are for 8A. Don't
Yeah.
exclude them. You might
Mhm.
not get the whole contract, but you can still get a piece of that contract. Go get yourself an 8A partner. You can do
Right.
the market research. Who's most likely to win something like this? Who's 8A and has a relationship in that agency? So
Yep.
start thinking a little bit more strategically, and other doors will open that maybe you weren't necessarily expecting. And
Okay.
on the flip side of that coin, let's say you are the prime. Let's say you are bidding on that giant IDIQ. One of the things in the service industry that you are going to be required to do over a certain dollar threshold, and at the moment, that threshold is escaping my mind. Tell me if you know it, but it is required for you to have subcontracting plans. So
Oh,
you have to run and manage your own supplier diversity plan. So the government's now forcing you to work with smaller partners once you get big enough. So there's a level of progression, and
yeah.
there's steps to it, right? We can't start from the bottom and overextend ourselves by bidding on
Right.
a large contract. But if you build those relationships and you talk to the people that have a vested interest to know who you are, all it takes is for someone to give you a chance and then get
Right.
your foot in the door. And it's all downhill from there. I mean, you might still have to be proposing, but it certainly helps to have an advocate within the agency that you're targeting.
Agreed.
Oh, we talked a little bit about the quality control plans and the staffing plans, who, how, and when in the pre-award. But what about performance management? So what about after the award on a services contract? Keep the KPIs, the reporting you have to do. What are some of the things that you're seeing as requirements where those are concerned after award?
So with services, there is requirements, and they'll tell you in the scope of work in
Mhm.
detail what that is. But normally, it's within a certain amount of time, usually like 10 to 14 days. You have to do a kickoff, meet with the contracting officer, meet with the project managers, meet with the team, start delivering on the work that you stated, developing a work plan. And there's usually measurables where they'll kind of give you like, within 4 weeks, we want this, within, 2 months, we want this. We need this information. We need a staffing plan, a communication plan. We need to know how you're going to transition. That's usually a transition plan. So sometimes they'll ask for it in the proposal phase. Sometimes they'll inform you in the proposal phase that it will be required upon a contract award. So then you have a certain amount of time to then provide that information. So that's really when you and your project manager kind of get together and you start like coming up with a plan, like how we're going to transition. We have to start hiring. Who do we have to start onboarding? Who do we have to start training? What do we need to do? Communication plan. Who's going to, speak to who? Getting that working plan that you essentially put together in your proposal now transitioned over from capture to project management to start delivering on what you said you were going to deliver on, right? And then we find a lot of things like communication is huge. So having like almost like, I like to call them scrum meetings, but I think that's just because I'm very familiar with the software development world. Every 2 weeks or to every month, you have meetings to make sure that you are sharing your KPIs, you are sharing your reports. We like to do sometimes monthly status reports, and we call them MSRs, just so that they know, this is all the things that we stated in our work plan that we were going to deliver within these, first, 8 weeks. And this is the ones we have delivered on, and these are the ones that are pending, and these are the ones that are outstanding, and these are ones that we will get to. And then status updates from each, sometimes we can almost do it, status updates of the work performed and the work that's still outstanding, things like that. So it's just keeping those communication plans and site visits, meeting visits, stuff like that. So there's still work, that project management portion, and ensuring the quality of the work and ensuring that it is of best value. And that's constantly being measured. Resource management, ensuring that utilization of resources is being used properly, that you're able to meet the deliverables upon the deadlines that you stated. And if not, being honest and having those conversations beforehand. And that's where the risk assessment comes in. You also will find that there are a lot of internal meetings. I always tell people you don't plan for the internal costs. You're always like, I'm going to meet with the client for the year, once, 1 hour, once a month. So that's 12. No, also bid how many times internally, because mind you, got to pay those people.
Yep. Every single time you have a meeting, how many people are in that meeting? Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
It costs money. So you want to put that on as well. You want to consider how many internal meetings that you're going to have. If you have tag ups, daily tag ups with your team, if you have, weekly project management meetings to kind of go over the status and internally decide how you're going to get over the risk and, what the finances are looking based on what you propose versus what you budgeted and so on and so forth. So all that is really what you want to take into account. But there's a lot that happens after award. Like, that's when the work starts hitting the fan right there.
It really does. And everybody thinks, I can't wait. I can't wait to get my first government contract. But then they get it and they're like, oh, shit.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. As an employee, you used to do a piece of it. Like, now you're in charge of the whole pie and managing everyone in it. Like, it's not that easy. It's possible. It's obviously something that we all do, but it is not easy by any means.
You do want to have a system, like and I know what you're going to say. I use Monday.com for that.
Yeah, there you go.
But if you have, I don't care if you're tracking it on a spreadsheet, it needs to be tracked somewhere, right? Because you don't want to get caught by the government not knowing where you're at on a certain deliverable or a certain milestone. And while we're talking about employees, I've had this thing up on my screen for a while, but I wanted to show you guys this tool that you can use if you need to kind of calculate quickly, like labor rates for, whether you're an SME or whether you're pricing a contract. You can actually, or maybe you got an applicant and, trying to figure out where they fit. Let's say that my applicant has an associate's degree. And let's say that they've got 10 to 15 years of experience. And I'm not going to mess with the price range, but we're just going to say that they're working at the contractor location. And they're a small business, and they don't have a security clearance. This is roughly what you can expect the government to pay. So there's a standard deviation. 59 and 156 are quite, a big difference. But you can go down here and kind of take a look at some of the positions, what the experience level is, where it's being used, and you know,
And then you could also, I mean, there's comp analysis tools that you can use.
there's all kind of stuff in here.
There's a ton. So like you can even organize it based on, obviously, state plays a huge factor.
Location.
Industry, company size, all that plays a factor. I mean, we know that. Like, there's no way that they expect anything other than that. So doing a competence, and it's called fair and reasonable pricing. So the fair and reasonable pricing is that, like, if you can back your data up and where you got it from, they're okay. And for many companies, like large companies, believe it or not, like they're going to salary.com. They're putting in a labor category. They're choosing a description that sort of meets it. And they're like, oh, what's the average salary? Like, you wouldn't believe how many people I see do that. And I'm like, what? Like, and they have huge contracts and they've been doing this forever, but it's fair and reasonable. It's like, this is the data. Salary.com says that, a project manager level 5 with this many years experience, direct report to the CEO in Florida, makes this much a year. And what they'll do, and they'll bid that as a direct rate, and they'll copy and paste or, take a screenshot of that, and they'll post that in their fair and reasonable pricings when they're putting together their data to back up their labor category pricing. So that is very common.
That's a great tip. I hope you guys caught that. That was a gem she just dropped.
It helps, trust me.
It does. That's very helpful.
The government can't ever say, like, that's not, no, sorry, data. It's all there.
It's there. It's there. So I want to go ahead. We have a few minutes left. And as much as I would love to stay and hang out, I got to get to bed. I'm not really feeling all that great this evening. So let's get to our questions. And do we have any in the chat? Let's go see.
I don't know, but I jingle with my head rings.
Thank you, Joe. Joe said salutes and respect. Glad to have you with us tonight, Joe. Thank you and welcome.
Yeah.
Nathan says, this is the first one I'm attending. Is it often that these have no video component? Oh, you needed to refresh. Got it, sir. Yes, we sometimes have a few tech failures and sometimes intro plays, sometimes it doesn't, but we try to keep it fun around here. Thanks for tuning in. So I don't see any questions. Anybody have any service contract questions while you guys have us here? You're struggling. Maybe you saw something in a solicitation. You want to talk about it or ask a question. Now's the time to do it.
Yup.
I got to say, though, now is the time of year that, like, the service, even especially at the state level, I mean, quantity, because the money's flowing now. The budgets, the money's flowing, right? If they had Q1 money left over, they're spending that. They're getting their Q2 budgets. And I am just, the quantity is insane. I'm spending probably 25% more time this quarter than I did last quarter, just reviewing opportunities, because that's not really all that normal from my
it's
my memory
normal.
serving me
This is usually a slow time, and it has not been.
It's not been slow. I remember back when we used to shut down between Christmas and New Year's because nothing was happening. It was crickets in the government. And now, like, I'm
many proposals. Like,
that
pipeline is like ridiculous, and it's just there's opportunities coming every day. And I'm like, bro, it's Christmas. Are you good?
I know. I spoke with a newer marketing company. They do video production. Spoke with them earlier today and kind of showed them a review of the market in their particular state. And there was something like 26,000 opportunities just in the last couple of years, just for video production in his state. So, he knew that there was a market, but he didn't realize how vast it was.
Yeah.
Definitely do your market research, guys. These opportunities, they're good. 70% is competed over and over and over again. So when you figure out who buys what you sell, don't wait for a solicitation. Go introduce yourself. What's the harm? They might say not right now, but they know your name, right? So when you come around next year with your proposal, they're going to know your name then too, hopefully, if you've maintained that relationship. So I
Yeah,
don't
it's
have a whole lot
important.
more to add to the professional services conversation, but be sure to check out FAR Part 37 if you're in services. Those are clauses that you will need to know.
You will.
Well,
Take a nap.
yeah, I'm definitely going to hit the hay. It has been wonderful. I don't think we're here next week.